Hello, everyone. This is recording number 10 for Aristotle, a class on the Nicomachean Ethics. Today, we turn to Book 6 of the Nicomachean Ethics, where Aristotle discusses the virtues of thinking. He starts out with a distinction between two parts of reason. One of them is called calculative. And here Aristotle adds to what he already said about the nature of deliberation. He says that deliberation is a kind of calculating. And the way we can think about this is that when we deliberate, we are as if we're weighing considerations for and against courses of action. So there is one part of reason which has as its distinctive activity to engage in kinds of thinking that have something to do with deliberation. That is as much as we know for now. And then there is another part of reason, which is called scientific, and it engages in theorizing. Aristotle says that these two parts of reason have, as it were, their domain. The calculative part of reason is concerned with things that can be otherwise. And that is a kind of technical expression, what can be otherwise. And a way to think about that is to, let's say you were to deliberate about whether to take a journey, then you would be concerned with things such as how the weather is going to be, whom you are going to meet, and so on and so forth. And those are things that can be otherwise. There's a lot more to say about this expression, but that is at least for current purposes a starting point. On the contrary, the scientific part of reason is concerned with those things, the principles of which cannot be otherwise. And that is, for example, metaphysics, theology, certain basic questions in physics. Now, once Aristotle has this distinction between two parts of reason, he has what he needs for a distinction between two kinds of excellences of thinking. The excellences of the calculative part of reason are the virtues of practical thinking. Broadly speaking, those virtues that have something to do with agency. The most famous virtue of this kind is excellence in deliberation, also called practical wisdom in Greek, Phronesis. And then there are also two less well known virtues of practical reasoning, consideration and comprehension. The virtues of theoretical thinking are scientific knowledge, understanding, and theoretical wisdom. That is the translation of the famous Greek term Sophia. Now, in addition to those two sets of excellences of thinking, practical, theoretical, there is also techne, expertise, and recently there has been quite a bit of interest among scholars in what is techne and how does Aristotle conceive of it. For now, I will only say two things. One, that Techne is also concerned with what can be otherwise, but it is not concerned with agency. Now, among all those excellences of thinking, and there were quite a number that I mentioned, there's really just one that attracts a lot of scholarly discussion, and that is phronesis, practical wisdom, excellence, and deliberation. There is a huge body of work on what is Aristotle's conception of phronesis, what is his conception of the person who has phronesis, and this person is called the phronimos, and there's no agreement on how we should think of this. Now, I want to end this recording by just raising a few questions and making some observations on the focus of scholarship on phronesis. The first observation is that 20th century scholarship has been quite importantly motivated by the question of how we should think of the difference between Aristotelian ethics on the one hand and modern moral philosophy, And initially, and by that I mean in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, work was mostly done on, what might be closest in Aristotle to what today we call moral reasoning. And from that point of view, Phronesis, as it were, stood out as especially interesting because it seemed that, well, the kind of thinking that the Phronimos does, maybe that is at least somewhat in the neighborhood of moral thinking. However, in more recent years, scholars have moved away a little bit from the idea that it is a goal for us to identify dimensions in Aristotle's ethics that are somewhat like moral philosophy. On the contrary, scholars have thought, well, actually, there are quite deep and interesting differences. And once one is sort of taking that perspective, one may be inclined to take a step back from the almost exclusive focus on phronesis and also think about the question of why Aristotle is so interested in this wide range of excellences of thinking. The second observation I want to make is just one about epistemology in Aristotle and its relation to ethics. There is no one treatise in Aristotle's works that is specifically about epistemology. Rather, his views about knowledge are, as it were, distributed across any number of different treatises. And this discussion here in Book 6 of the Nicomachean Ethics is one important component of how Aristotle thinks of knowledge and wisdom and theorizing. And that just raises, I think, some questions that are worth thinking more about. One, just what is someone's conception of knowledge if quite a lot of what they have to say about it is kind of part of normative theorizing, part of their ethics? And conversely, second, what is someone's conception of ethics if quite a bit of what they have to say about a well lived human life is actually about excellences in theoretical thinking?